a woman choosing peace over perfection, and love that ended not with betrayal, but with silence that said everything. After nearly 2 decades together, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's love story has come to an end, and the way it unraveled has left fans stunned. From the outside, they looked untouchable. Red carpet smiles, heartfelt tributes, and 2 stars who seemed to have beaten the odds of Hollywood and fame. But when Nicole finally stepped into the spotlight after filing for divorce, one thing was clear. The fairy tale was over, and the truth was far more complicated. For years, Nicole and Keith had been the picture of elegance and endurance. They met in 2005, married just a year later in a romantic Sydney ceremony, and became one of Hollywood's most adored couples. Keith often spoke about how Nicole had saved him from his darkest times, while she described him as her safe place. To the public, their love seemed unbreakable. But behind the glitz and glamour, cracks had started to show long before the world noticed. Close friends say that for the past 2 years, Nicole had been quietly pulling away. The distance wasn't just emotional, it was physical. While Keith spent more time touring and recording in Nashville, Nicole was in London and Los Angeles, fully immersed in film projects. They were living separate lives, connected only by FaceTime calls and red carpet reunions. People close to Nicole say she tried to make it work, even flying back and forth between continents to keep their family grounded. But as one source put it, eventually, love alone couldn't fix what fame and distance had done. Insiders say the final straw came earlier this year after a series of arguments that centered around priorities. Keith wanted a simpler life, more family time in Nashville, away from the industry noise. Nicole, however, felt a creative rebirth happening. After years of supporting his career and raising their daughters, she was finally stepping into her own again. That difference in direction became the silent battle between them. When the divorce filing surfaced, it wasn't loud or messy. It was quiet, deliberate, and deeply telling. Nicole filed without fanfare through her lawyer in Los Angeles, citing irreconcilable differences. There were no accusations, no public statements, just a quiet acknowledgement that something beautiful had run its course. Those close to Keith say he was blindsided, that he truly believed they could still work things out. He'd reportedly written her letters, asking for one more chance to try counseling, but by then, Nicole's decision was final. She wasn't angry. She was done. She'd spent years waiting for things to feel right again, but the spark never returned. Insiders describe her as heartbreakingly calm during the process. One friend said, "She didn't want revenge. She wanted peace." Even more surprising was what Nicole didn't ask for: spousal support. Despite a combined fortune and countless assets, Nicole reportedly waived her right to seek any financial support from Keith. To those who know her best, that decision said everything. It wasn't about money. It was about closing a chapter on her own terms. She wanted independence, freedom, and closure. In Hollywood, where divorces often turn into media spectacles, Nicole's quiet resolve felt almost radical. Fans flooded social media with messages of support, praising her for handling it with grace. But beneath that calm exterior, those closest to her say there were nights filled with tears, reflection, and guilt. She loved Keith deeply, still does in some way, but love alone couldn't heal what years of emotional distance had done. Meanwhile, Keith has remained mostly silent, choosing to focus on music. Sources say he's poured his heart into songwriting, with friends hinting that his upcoming album may be his most personal yet. He's still wearing his wedding ring in public, sparking rumors that he's not ready to let go. As for Nicole, she's focusing on her daughters and her craft, diving into new film projects and rediscovering herself. Those close to her say she feels lighter, more centered, and more in control than she has in years. One insider summed it up perfectly. For the first time in a long time, she's living for herself. Fans are divided, some heartbroken that one of Hollywood's golden couples is over, others admiring Nicole for walking away before resentment could replace love. The truth is, their story isn't one of scandal or betrayal. It's a story of timing, of love that couldn't survive the distance between two people growing in different directions. Nicole and Keith's marriage was never about perfection. It was about trying, about holding on, about two people who wanted to make forever last. But sometimes forever means letting go. And for Nicole Kidman, that might just be her bravest role yet. In the weeks following the announcement, the world watched as Nicole Kidman stepped into a new chapter of her life, quietly, but with an unmistakable sense of strength. She didn't give interviews, didn't issue statements, and didn't post cryptic captions on social media. Instead, she let her silence speak volumes. Paparazzi photos showed her in New York, walking through Central Park with her daughters, smiling faintly, her wedding ring noticeably gone. There was a stillness about her that seemed unfamiliar to the public, but comforting to those who knew her best. She was no longer the woman standing beside Keith Urban on a red carpet, clinging to the image of Hollywood perfection. She was simply Nicole again, private, reflective, and rebuilding. Inside sources say that Nicole's inner circle had been preparing for this shift for months. Her friends, Reese Witherspoon, Naomi Watts, and even Meryl Streep, had been her quiet support system, helping her navigate the emotional and logistical challenges of separation. One close friend revealed that Nicole leaned heavily on meditation, therapy, and journaling during the process. "She's incredibly introspective," they said. She wasn't angry. She was grieving, but also grateful for what they had and for the chance to start fresh. The divorce filing may have been simple on paper, but emotionally, it was layered. Nicole and Keith had built nearly 20 years of life together, 2 daughters, multiple homes, shared dreams, and countless memories. The disentangling of that wasn't just about dividing assets, it was about redefining identity. Keith had often said that Nicole was his anchor, the person who steadied him during his struggles with addiction and fame. For Nicole, Keith had been a reminder of love after heartbreak, especially following her high-profile split from Tom Cruise. Together, they'd built something rare in Hollywood: longevity. But even the strongest foundations can crumble when the people within them begin to evolve in different directions. Those close to Keith say he took the separation harder than expected. He reportedly moved out of their Nashville home temporarily, staying in a friend's guest house while finishing his upcoming album. Insiders describe the music as raw and emotional, filled with lyrics about regret, longing, and lessons learned too late. "He's not bitter," one friend said, "just heartbroken." Keith never imagined life without Nicole. She was his muse, his reason, his family. Losing that stability has shaken him in a way he didn't see coming. While Keith processed the loss through music, Nicole found healing through movement. She threw herself into work, signing on to 2 new film projects within months of the split. Those on set say she carried herself with quiet focus, showing no signs of distraction. She was professional, present, and deeply committed to her craft. You could sense that she was channeling everything she'd been through, one crew member shared. It wasn't sadness, it was strength. Like she'd decided that the only way to honor the past was to move forward, but the media wasn't ready to let go of the story. Rumors swirled about the reasons behind the breakup: infidelity, ego clashes, career jealousy, yet none of it stuck. Both Nicole and Keith maintained a dignified silence, refusing to feed speculation. Even when tabloids tried to link Nicole to co-stars or paint Keith as the wounded musician, neither responded. That restraint only deepened public respect for them. It became clear that this wasn't a story of scandal. It was a story of 2 people choosing dignity over drama. Behind the scenes, co-parenting became the couple's quiet priority. Friends say that despite the heartbreak, Nicole and Keith have worked tirelessly to shield their daughters from the chaos. "They're united in that," a family source explained. "Whatever happens between them, the girls come first. Always." They reportedly have a routine that allows both parents equal time and involvement, with schedules built around filming and touring commitments. It's not perfect, but it's peaceful. And that's all Nicole ever wanted. Privately, though, the emotional toll has been heavy. Those who've known Nicole since her early years say she's had to rebuild herself more than once. Losing her marriage to Tom Cruise had once left her shattered. This time, the pain was quieter but deeper. She wasn't a young woman starting over. She was a seasoned woman, letting go of a life she'd built piece by piece. Yet, there's a difference this time: acceptance. She's not searching for love or validation. She's rediscovering self-worth, one quiet morning at a time. Keith, on the other hand, is still learning how to exist without her presence. He's been seen attending church more frequently, confiding in close friends, and staying sober, a promise he made to Nicole years ago. Music executives close to him believe this next phase could define his artistry in new ways. "Pain has always been part of Keith's songwriting," one producer said. "But this time it's more honest, more human. He's not just writing love songs. He's writing about loss, forgiveness, and the cost of fame." Meanwhile, Hollywood has started rewriting the narrative around Nicole. Once labeled as reserved or private, she's now being celebrated for her emotional intelligence and quiet resilience. Interviews she's given since the filing have been subtle but revealing, her words careful, her tone calm. When asked about change, she simply said, Sometimes you have to make peace with the idea that love evolves. It doesn't disappear, it just takes a different shape. That one line captured everything the public had been wondering. Nicole wasn't bitter, she wasn't broken, she was evolving. Her career, once defined by her relationships, has entered a new era where she stands entirely on her own. Her upcoming roles reflect that: complex women, layered emotions, and themes of self-discovery. She's no longer acting to prove something. One director said, "She's acting to express something." As the months have passed, both Nicole and Keith have found their separate rhythms. They still share a quiet respect, occasionally texting about their daughters or family milestones. There's no hostility, just distance, the kind that hurts but heals. Friends believe that time will eventually soften the edges, maybe even bring friendship back into the picture. For now, though, they're both learning to live with the space between them. In a world obsessed with drama, their breakup stands out for its grace. No public feuds, no messy accusations. Just two people who once loved each other deeply, deciding to part before love turned into something unrecognizable. And maybe that's the lesson hidden in their story, that sometimes letting go is the highest form of love. For Nicole Kidman, the end of her marriage isn't the end of her story, it's the start of a quieter, more authentic chapter. She's no longer trying to live up to an image or maintain a fairy tale. She's living truthfully even when it hurts. And for Keith Urban, the pain of loss may just inspire his greatest art yet. The world may have lost one of its golden couples, but what remains is something just as powerful: the raw, honest humanity behind the headlines. In the end, that's what makes this story unforgettable. Months turned into seasons, and as time moved forward, the noise around Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's divorce began to fade. The tabloids found new stories to chase, the public moved on to fresher scandals, and the once constant spotlight on their marriage dimmed to a soft, respectful glow. But behind closed doors, both Nicole and Keith were still navigating the quiet aftermath, the part of any ending that no one sees. For Nicole, that meant learning how to be alone again. Not lonely, but alone in a way that felt freeing. She began spending long mornings at her Nashville home with her daughters, cooking breakfast, reading scripts, and keeping her phone on silent. Those close to her said she found peace in the small things, the stillness she hadn't experienced in years. She no longer had to perform the role of the perfect wife or the steady rock in someone else's storm. She could simply be herself, flaws and all. Professionally, this new independence began to show in her work. Directors noticed a shift in her performances, an emotional rawness, an unfiltered honesty that felt magnetic. One film critic described her latest role as a woman unafraid of her own silence. That line stuck with people because it seemed to mirror Nicole's real life. She was unafraid now, of endings, of change, of rediscovery. Even her public appearances became less rehearsed. At one film premiere, she arrived alone, wearing a simple black gown, smiling softly for cameras. There was no sadness, no defiance, just calm. And in Hollywood, that kind of peace is the rarest luxury of all. Keith, meanwhile, had chosen to heal through his first love: music. His new songs began to tell a story the public hadn't heard before. Gone were the catchy anthems about love and redemption. In their place were slower, more introspective ballads about time, faith, and the spaces between people. His fans noticed it instantly. The lyrics felt deeply personal. Lines about losing your anchor, about watching someone you love fade into memory, about wishing you'd listened sooner. The album became his most emotional work to date, debuting to quiet acclaim. During a live show in Australia, he paused before singing one of the songs and simply said, "This one's for everyone who's ever had to let go with love." The audience fell silent. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of pain, of growth, of truth. Despite the distance, Nicole and Keith's connection was never completely severed. They continued to coordinate birthdays, holidays, and milestones for their daughters. Every now and then, someone would spot them together at a school event, a private dinner, or quietly exchanging a hug backstage at one of Keith's concerts. Those moments weren't about reconciliation. They were about respect, about understanding that family doesn't dissolve with divorce, it transforms. Friends close to them say that the two now share something deeper than before: mutual acceptance. The kind that doesn't need validation, only peace. In interviews, both remained remarkably composed. Keith spoke gently about change and gratitude, while Nicole, in her quiet way, described this chapter as a lesson in grace. Neither blamed the other. There were no pointed remarks, no veiled messages, just maturity. In an industry built on spectacle, that restraint made their story stand out. It reminded people that even in heartbreak, dignity still has power. Behind the scenes, Nicole began exploring new creative paths. She took on producing roles, mentoring young actresses, and even stepping back from certain projects to focus on her daughter's teenage years. Those who knew her well said it was the happiest they'd seen her in a long time. She wasn't chasing awards or approval anymore. She was living slowly, intentionally, letting life unfold instead of trying to control it. She's learning to trust the quiet, one friend said. And for Nicole, that's everything. Keith, too, began redefining what happiness meant. He moved back into his main Nashville home, reconnected with old friends, and started spending more time off stage. His priorities had shifted from fame to family, from noise to authenticity. There were reports that he'd taken up painting, a private hobby Nicole had once encouraged. It became his form of meditation, a way to fill the silence without losing himself in it. When asked in an interview if he missed being married, he smiled softly and said, "I miss the moments, not the marriage, but I'm grateful for both." That line echoed across headlines, not for its sadness, but for its honesty. As months turned into a year, the narrative around their split evolved. What began as a story of heartbreak transformed into one of rebirth. Nicole had stepped into her own power, and Keith had rediscovered his purpose. Neither had fallen apart. Instead, they'd both found new versions of themselves, stronger, wiser, and more grounded. Their fans, who once grieved the loss of their favorite Hollywood couple, began to see the beauty in how they'd handled it. Not every ending has to be bitter. Sometimes it's simply necessary. In one of her rare public reflections, Nicole said something that resonated deeply with her audience. Love doesn't always last in the way we hope it will, but that doesn't mean it failed. It just changed shape. What matters is how you carry it forward. That statement summed up everything. The love between her and Keith hadn't disappeared. It had transformed into something more peaceful, more mature, and maybe even more real. Their story became a quiet lesson about growing apart without hatred, about choosing healing over drama, about recognizing that two people can love each other deeply and still not be right for each other forever. It's a truth that most people learn the hard way, but few have the grace to live it publicly with such dignity. Today, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban stand as two people who once shared an extraordinary love story, and who now share a deep respect for what it gave them. They are no longer each other's partners, but they remain each other's history, a reminder that even in endings, there can be light. And maybe that's the real love story here. Not the one that ends at the altar, or the one that fades in the spotlight, but the one that continues quietly in the lessons, the memories, and the peace that follows. For Nicole, this chapter isn't about what she lost. It's about what she found, herself. And for Keith, it's about learning that heartbreak doesn't mean failure. It means growth. Together, apart, they've written one of Hollywood's most human stories. One not about scandal or betrayal, but about the courage it takes to say goodbye with love. And so, as the lights dim on one of Hollywood's most admired love stories, what remains isn't bitterness, it's grace. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban may have gone their separate ways, but their journey together left behind something rare in the world of fame and fleeting headlines: authenticity. They showed the world that love doesn't have to end in chaos to be real, that parting ways can be just as profound as staying together, and that sometimes the truest kind of strength is quiet acceptance. Nicole has found peace in solitude, her spirit steady, her heart open to new beginnings. Keith has turned his heartbreak into art, his songs now carrying the weight of lessons learned through love. They've both evolved, not as rivals, but as two souls who once walked side by side and learned how to let go with grace. And maybe that's the real story behind their divorce. Not an ending, but a transformation. A reminder that love, in all its forms, doesn't vanish when the vows fade. It changes, it softens, it teaches. In the end, what Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban shared wasn't just a marriage. It was a chapter that shaped them both, and a story that will live quietly, beautifully, beyond the spotlight.